Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Here we go. We're going to have a full house today, aren't we? This is great. I think we have 117 people registered, which is fantastic. So I'll ask everyone to keep themselves muted because we'll be a large group unless you're speaking. We'll be seeing Sam any minute now. There he is. Let me unmute Sam.
Hello.
There we go. I'm going to pin Sam so everyone can see him. And just for those of you who are joining, welcome. Just be aware that we are recording this session. So if you don't want to be seen, you can leave your camera off or feel free to turn it on. Totally up to you. And we'll give it another few minutes to let everyone join. How many are we already? 42. We're up to 42. We have 117 registered. So let's see how many more we can get. I think our Zoom plan caps out at 100. So we shall see. $52, $53. This is great. Hi, everybody. $54. Give another few minutes before we get started.
Do you want us to be on video as well?
Yeah, why not? It's nice to see each other. We're so socially isolated. We might as well see some friendly faces, some fellow writers.
We can pretend we're in a big town hall.
What if the faces are kind of scary because like they haven't had much sunlight or their haircut?
Those are easy enough to hide.
Well, we're all in the same boat anyway.
How many people have been able to stop touching their faces?
No, it's impossible, isn't it?
Apparently, humans and primates are the only animals that touch their faces.
Interesting.
So we were always going to get infected. We're always touching it. Like you don't see cats and dogs touching their faces.
My face itches way too much.
It's impossible not to scratch an itch, isn't it? So 57 people, we're at 1 minute after. We'll give it a few more minutes to make sure everyone gets a chance because I know that WriteHive has a very full agenda for today. So there's probably a few other events that are wrapping up now. We'll give those people a chance to come join us over here.
I'm going to take this moment to get some water, so I'll be back in a sec.
Okay.
Got my soda, so I'm all set.
Fantastic.
I have my themed mug.
Oh, what does it say? I put the lit in literature. Perfect.
The lit.
That's great. That's great. I've hit my max for coffees today, so I'm back to the water as well. And by the way, if you hear
coffee?
I'm sorry, say again?
What's your max for coffee? I didn't know.
3. I cap it at 3 cups. They're rather big mugs though. I have my Algonquin Park mug here. It's a massive one. And by the way, if you hear a baby in the background, that's my not quite 3-month-old daughter. We have an open concept house, which is interesting when you have a new baby. So apologize for any screaming.
Never apologize for a 3-month-old.
I'll mute myself once we get started, but we'll let Sam get back and then we'll take it away. So we're up to 67 people. That's pretty good. It's about what you can expect for when you have 100 and some registered. What do we have a message here? The cat broke my world's greatest dad mug this morning. Oh no, that's too bad. You're still the world's greatest dad, Thaddeus, I'm sure. And by the way, we're going to be a lot of people, so it might be the easiest thing to do is if we just paste our questions in the chat. I'll keep track of those, and I'll kind of act as a moderator today, and make sure everyone's questions, as much as possible, get answered. So if you want to find the group chat, you can go just move your cursor down to the bottom of the Zoom window. There's a button called chat near the middle. You can click that and make sure you selected everyone so we can all see your question, or you can do it privately to me if you want. Everyone is fine. Everyone's fine. Also, the questions we emailed. I don't know. Did anyone email me questions? I haven't checked my email in a few hours, but let me go take a look.
I did. But I can paste them if that's easier.
Oh, there's, I'm seeing them come in now. Yeah, sure. I'll make sure that those are on my list. I've got an email from Karen and from Sarah for questions. Okay. Sam's back. So why don't I introduce myself? Hi, everybody. I'm Mike Pietchuk. I'm the co-founder of So You Want to Write. We are a group that was founded in 2017 by Sam and I. We started as a pub night meetup in Toronto in Canada here. 20 people, and we've grown since then to over, I think, 3,000 now, Sam, aren't we? We've started a website. We've banked members from all over the world. And now basically we run online workshops and coaching programs. And we put writers in a one-on-one situation on Skype with literary agents, with authors, with editors, so that they can give you feedback on your books and your writing projects. So today we're talking about how to land a literary agent. And we have our esteemed Sam Hiyate, literary agent extraordinaire, our in-house expert here. Sam is the president and the founder of the Rights Factory, which is a literary agency in Toronto. Sam's been doing this for, what, Sam, 35 years now, I think?
Well, that's all of publishing. I was a publisher, but the agenting part is coming up to 20 years.
Fantastic. So we've got someone who really knows the market, not just in Canada, but who works, you know, in the States a lot, goes to every, what do you call those? The book conferences in London, and
Book fairs, yeah.
book fairs all over the world. So Sam's got a really good handle on the whole literary agent world and the publishing world. So why don't I turn it over to Sam? Why don't we start, Sam, with just maybe, you know, a few words on the general state of literary agenting and what you can tell writers, and then we'll get into a Q&A session. So paste your questions in the chat section, please.
Yeah, I'm going to be very brief because I feel like I will get to as many. I'd rather answer your questions and through that kind of illustrate through my answers some of the things that I'm seeing in the market and in the book world in general. So my own experience is I was when I came out of school, I was good at certain things, but what I really loved, because I'd studied English literature, I really loved reading and writing. And so I ended up, even though I had a job at an insurance company, I ended up starting a literary magazine just for fun. And it became this really cool thing that took over my life completely. And then I started a small press as a result. And I was in this weird situation where I was working full time. I had this little press that did, at the beginning, 2 or 3 books a year. And then I had this magazine that did 4 issues. So that just grew and grew. And then at one point it was unsustainable. Then I sold the publishing company, and then I got recruited to be an agent. And then I thought, this is something I should be doing all along, because, you know, for those of you who maybe have worked at small presses before or haven't, I can only tell you that there has never been a situation where you have people that love what they do who are being paid almost nothing. And in some cases it's voluntary anyway. So they're just doing it for the love of it. And they're trying to make beautiful books to come out, and then they're competing with these huge publishers that have all these marketing budgets and promotion and full-time staff. So I remember feeling overwhelmed when I was a small publisher, because I had to figure out how to get my books on the shelves against Penguin or Random House. Back in those days, there were 2 companies. And what I'm noticing is that since I started as a full-time agent, and I was doing rights selling a little before that for my publishing company, but it was 2003, January 2003. So it's really just a little bit less than 20 years now, when I started as an agent, and then I've had to kind of figure out the publishing world through those eyes, working with writers. And generally, if you're here as part of this online conference, my main advice, if you want to get an agent, I think this talk is correct me guys, is how to land an agent. Is that it?
Yeah, you got
Okay.
it.
So there's a few things that are really important to know. The first thing is, to get an agent depends on where you are with your project. So there's a split right at the beginning where if you're a fiction writer or nonfiction writer, just give me a quick show of hands, I'll get a sense. Fiction writers? Almost everybody, okay. Nonfiction writers? Ish. Okay, well, so I'll do nonfiction in a minute then for those of you. Okay, there's a couple maybe. So nonfiction depends mainly now on your expertise, your platform, and platform is an interesting word in publishing. It's basically the number of people that you can reach through your message without the book. So let's say you teach a course and the course is very popular and you have a course notes and everybody loves the course and it's oversubscribed. Sometimes that is a great way to get a book because you already are an expert and then the material is proven. There's a book that came out a few years ago that's been a huge bestseller that came out exactly that way. It's a book called Sapiens by a professor of, an Israeli professor, talking about how did human beings become human beings. And so that came out of a course note. The other thing is for nonfiction is often books will come out of articles. So you'll start writing articles, like if you're Malcolm Gladwell, and then you get a book deal for The Tipping Point because he wrote a bunch of articles that all answered the same question. So again, he was, publishing and building a platform with the world. And then the publisher said, oh, now is a good time to get a book out, in those cases. So the third way is if you have something that goes viral, like a TED Talk. If almost anybody that does a TED Talk and the next day there's like 500,000 people looking at it, there's a book deal, because what you've told the publishers is you have something interesting to say. And even if you didn't have a platform before that moment, your TED Talk becomes your platform. So whenever something goes viral. So those are the very fast and simple rules for nonfiction. For everybody else, it's a little bit harder. And the first difference between fiction and nonfiction is that you have to have a complete manuscript. In nonfiction, you can have an idea for a book, or the publishers will say, we love this article, can you make this into a book for us? So you need to really invest time in your manuscript as a fiction writer, whether it's like children's or adults, genre or commercial or literary. You need to make the manuscript into the best manuscript you can make, because you're only going to get one shot at it. And this is a general rule in publishing. Like, you guys have one shot at getting an agent because that agent is going to judge you based on what you give them. And then when we have the same problem, when we send something to an editor, like let's say a Penguin Random House, that manuscript or proposal has one shot. They're going to read it once, they're going to look at it and say, is this something worth pursuing or no? And then say we want to talk more about it, or it's going to be yes or no. Those are the only answers. So by the time you want to approach an agent, you want to make sure that it is the strongest, most powerful version of the story that you have, that it's been vetted. Theoretically, you had alpha readers and beta readers. You've had a bunch of people work on it so that it's flawless, that the pacing, the characters, the drama, everything that you can use any kind of measurement or critical way you can use to describe your book, it's being vetted that way so that you can now go to the next step, which is, I want to get the best agent that I can to get me a publishing deal. Because often it's that same manuscript. If you decide that sometimes people are like, I tried for a year to get an agent, I'm going to self-publish, or I'm going to approach a publisher directly. You still reach the same point, which is, I have the best thing I can, so I'm going to try to do something else with it. I mean, too often people find out that they failed because they'll self-publish something and then it gets reviewed or criticized, and then they realize how poor it was because they just didn't give it enough editorial attention or critical attention. So the number one thing has to be quality, and the number two thing has to be finding an agent that is looking for new writers assuming you're a new writer. Sometimes I get a lot now of people that want to change their agents. Like my other agent stopped working with me. They don't care. They don't love me. They don't, whatever, all the reasons people leave other relationships. So I have to say, well, do we really want to, if you're going to divorce them, are we ready to start a new thing together? So, but I'm assuming most of that isn't you here. You're looking for an agent for the first time. So one thing you'll notice is that some agents aren't looking for new people. And some people are very open about whether they like to find fresh new voices or debut authors, or they'd rather have, people that are very established and already have a publishing career, because then they're more interested in managing their careers. So some agents are one, some of the other, some agents are both. So I think you need to do your research, which is my third point is research the agent and figure out how they want to be approached. And almost every agency website now will tell you what they're looking for. In our case, we always say, send us 3 chapters. And if we want more, we'll ask, so it's a partial we're asking. And if we want a full, we'll ask you for the full manuscript. Because that means we're taking it more seriously. We were impressed with the beginning. We're going to read it and think about it. So I think that's all I'm going to say for now, because we're already, I know there's a bunch of questions. Mike, do you want to just moderate from here and we'll just do the questions?
Yeah, why not? So I have been emailed questions from Karen Nelson and Sarah Stankiewicz. Karen, are you around? And would you like to maybe ask your question on camera? Do you want to unmute yourself? I don't know if I see you.
To figure out how to do it. I'm a little
There you are.
new to this whole Zoom thing. All right.
We got you. Go for it.
Some of my questions go with what he spoke on, so I'll try not to ask questions he's already answered. For me as a newbie, I just finished my manuscript and I'm trying to do as much research as you said as I can, but what's the purview of the literary agent? I'm concerned with the voice of the writer being switched because this voice sells better than this voice, though I understand that. So is that in the realm, or how does that work?
Are you saying, does the agent interfere with the writer's work?
In a sense, yes, sir, but not necessarily are they going to scrap the whole story. It's just if the agent feels the writer's voice isn't strong enough, is it within their realm to say this needs to change and it will be accepted better? Or is it just, you know what I mean?
That's a very good question now that I understand it. Yeah, so we will sometimes negotiate. So if I read something and I say, I think this would be more of a commercial, or you'd have a better chance of getting a publisher if you made these changes. That's somebody who is spending every day talking to people to sell them something and listening to what they want to buy, and then passing on that kind of marketing advice to you, the writer. An agent is somebody who exists in this strange space between what the market wants to buy and what the artist wants to make. So our job is to negotiate that space. So sometimes I will say to somebody, I love what this book could be, but this character is not very likable in the beginning. My most common suggestions are make the character more likable so we can invest in the character. Make the ending, like one of my writers sent me a novel and I loved it. And then in the end, he dies. And then I'm like, dude, like I just invested so much in this character. And I was watching their thing and I'm like, why do they have to die in the end? Can we talk about this? And so we negotiated an ending where the character does like a bunch of clever things, escapes death just narrowly. And we don't even know how he does it, but it's kind of magical now. And now he's kind of on his own in a completely different way than we would have expected. And part of the reason why I think the author did that was they didn't understand in their own mind how somebody could do some of the things this character did and to keep them alive. Because the writer thought that the person was so unlikable now that they become a bad guy. And they said, no, like this person did a bunch of things to stay alive and was dealing with some dark forces all along. And for them to survive at the end means that they get a fresh start. That's how I'm reading it, right? So the ending now is so much more optimistic that I feel like I'm not embarrassed to show this to an editor where I think the editor is going to say, oh, I really like how the story goes and I love the ending because it's the guy magically survives, but we don't know what's going to happen next.
Got it.
So sometimes it's that kind of conversation, but I think other than you know, making the main character more likable, changing the ending so that it's satisfying. Like, a book has to have a payoff for a reader, even if it's a literary book. Even a poem has a payoff. You know, it can't just be something that's going to alienate the reader. Even though there are some books that have successfully done that, but that's, you know, those are the exceptions, not the general rule.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if I've answered your question there. Do you have anything to follow up on that?
You definitely have. My main concern was I'm going to say this once and not take up too much time, but I worry about representation. So that's why I said the agent changing the voice of the writer, because I'm worried that what I write and what I experience is not going to be accepted so widely. So it's going to need to change.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen, because it's only going to change for a story point of view. That nobody can change your experience, and nobody should try to do that. What they might try to do is help you reshape the elements to tell a stronger story. But that's not messing with the fundamentals of your experience. Nobody should do that. Like, I've done a lot of memoirs where all it is that person's experience, and then the trick is sometimes to shape it into a narrative that is digestible and kind of paced so that it makes for a good reading experience.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Karen. So also, it was Sarah Stankiewicz that emailed me a question. Is she around? Is she on the call?
I'm here.
Great. You want to ask away?
Sure, thanks. So Sam, a lot of us, probably, not just me, have other jobs, not just writing full-time, trying to find an agent. And so I have published one book at a smaller publishing house, but I have a second manuscript that now I think I can seek representation from an agent. And I was wondering if having like this established career and not planning to quit it, is that like do agents see that as a liability? If you've like shown that you're going to be productive and continue producing, does it matter if you're planning to make this a full-time career or not?
I think most agents would feel a lot of pressure if you said, oh my God, now that you're my agent, I'm quitting my job. I'm so grateful. So I think what you're doing is very smart. Most of us on this side know what the odds are of you making enough money to live off your writing, that the odds are very small. So it makes sense to me. Even very established writers, I'm thinking here now of somebody like Roddy Doyle, who did those, you may have seen the movies, The Commitments, The Van. He did that Irish trilogy, I think, Scottish, or no, he's Irish. Doyle is an Irish name. So Roddy Doyle, he was a teacher who had kids, and he would get up at 5 a.m. and write for 2 hours every day for 2 different books, and then finally a 3rd book, and he still had to figure out his family and his partner and all that stuff. And then he won the Booker Prize, I think, for the 3rd book. And then he actually realized when the prize money came and all the publication contracts came from all the translations and, you know, the film deals. And then he realized, and he was quoted with this in an article, that he just said, for the first time, it seemed to me that I could quit my job as a teacher. And the idea of spending every day writing for the rest of my life was like a dream come true. So it's, that's much more common, you know, and even going back far enough, I mean, even Hemingway was a journalist way after he was writing novels. He still had to keep writing freelance pieces because the books would get published, but he wasn't part of the canon. They weren't bestsellers always. I think over time, they became popular. And a lot of those writers, I mean, I was reading something about F. Scott Fitzgerald the other day, and we all know The Great Gatsby now, but when he wrote Gatsby, it was a bust for, I think, 5 or 6 years, sold nothing. Nobody knew. They're like, what is this Great Gatsby book? What does it mean? And so, and even beyond that, I was talking to somebody recently about The Hobbit. You know, when The Hobbit first came out, it sold 400 copies in the first year in the 50s. Nobody knew what this was. They're like, what is The Hobbit? Anyway, so, you know. And
can you convey that commitment well in a query letter?
I think what you want to say is that in your case, that your first book, that it was a great experience, you had a small press, you're looking for something different, you're committed to your career, and maybe show how, you know, all you need is just a few sentences about that, because we want to know that you're committed, but we don't expect you to quit your job until the moment is right. You know, like sometimes people talk about these, you know, an advance for like $300,000 or $400,000. There's actually an article. I'm trying to remember the name of the woman who wrote it now. If I can find it. So Mike, do you know all the people that took this class? Because I can send you
I
the
have
article.
everyone's email address, so I can follow up.
Okay, so what I
afterwards.
can do is let me find this article, and it's a woman who got, I think, either $150,000 or $300,000 or something, and she said, "I got this huge advance. I thought it would change my life. Here's how I was almost destitute 2 years later."
Oh my God.
And she starts off with the obvious, which is like, who knew? Taxes, right? Like I got this check, and then it's like, anyway. So whenever any of my authors get a big advance, I'm like, talk to your accountant, because you now you get this money and you think it's all yours, but we can't ever forget about the fact that we belong to a country that expects us to pay taxes. Okay, any next question?
Thanks, Sarah. So next I had on my list, Emily. Is it one shot per author per agent, or is it one shot per manuscript? Emily, did you want to ask your question, elaborate?
Sure. So basically, he said you this one chance, but I wasn't sure if maybe you took your one chance 2 years ago, got a lot of
Yeah, no, it's not like I will never talk to you again. It's like, oh, you lost your chance years ago. We're not mean. And I often get, this is one of my favorite notes, just so you know, personally. Dear Sam, 2 years ago I sent you a manuscript, and I realize now it was so many things wrong with it. I know what I was thinking. This one is a lot better. Would you want to see this one? I'm like, oh, maybe they learned something. So I like that note, when people send me that note. But so it's one shot you get per project, per person, because I feel that way. It's really unlikely that I'll read something twice unless you're like, a friend of my mom's, and I can't say no or something. Like there's always personal favors, but for people that just come in through email, I want to know that the project that they have is something that I feel excited enough about that I can maybe sell it. And what even in a query letter, I want to see a query letter that is really well written. Think of a query letter as like a sample of your writing. There should be no typos. It should be as clean and beautiful as you can write. And because it's the first thing that I'm judging you by as a writer. I'm like, can they write a good query? And you should make an effort to write the best query you can. It's like being so qualified for a job and then having a bunch of typos in your resume, because somebody's like, is this person serious about working here? So you want to write a great letter that says, what your project is, why you think our agency or me would be a good agent for you, and what it is you're trying to accomplish as a writer. And one of the things, there's tons of resources out there on writing queries. I can tell you that every agent has almost like a little, idiosyncratic thing that they like. Mine is I like when people can do a bit of my homework for me and position the book. So if they say, this book is kind of like has the humor of, Sex in the City, and it combines with the adventure of like Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark. Those are the two things this book is about. I'm like, oh, I like both of those. Like maybe I like the story. So I kind of want to know where your book might fit into the market through existing, what we call comparables. Comparables can be a writer, a filmmaker, a character from a story, a specific book. So if you say Dracula is both a book and a character. Imagine if Dracula, had to do whatever, then this is what my story is. You guys may have heard of this story called The Historian by a woman called, is it Anna Kostova, I think maybe 10 years ago. That was a brilliant book, and it was about a woman who is a historian who starts to dig into her own family history because her father is such a mystery. And then she realizes that even though she couldn't see it coming, that her father probably was a vampire and maybe the original Dracula. But it comes so weird reading this story. You don't expect it. So like that would be a great pitch. Imagine if you were like a great researcher and something happened in your family and you had to figure out this thing, and your dad is always being like a mystery and he's kind of missing half the time and arrives at weird hours, always wears black. No, I'm just joking now, but I'm just saying. And then you realize what he is. So that would be such a great pitch, like how is it that your story is going to stand out? What can you compare it to? What can you tell me about it? Does it have a sense of humor? And if so, is it going to be like a Quentin Tarantino sense of humor or a Kafka kind of sense of humor, which is kind of, Kafka is so sad and waking up as a cockroach, I mean, we all feel that now, except it's like a cockroach, and if you go outside, somebody's going to spray you with some, insecticide, I guess. But he wrote that, and it's actually really dry and funny because he's on his back and he has to roll over. I mean, it's hard enough for people sometimes. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Do you have anything else to say, or do you want to? Can we go on?
Nope, thanks. That was perfect. Thanks so much.
Okay, good.
Thanks, Emily. I have Aprajita on my list next. Would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, so basically, I'm an author from India, and there aren't a lot of literary agencies here that have the amount of reach that agencies in the UK, US, Canada do. So somebody told me that since India was a Commonwealth country, it would be better to query solely to the UK. Is there any truth to that?
I find that most of I think they're becoming more American agents that are seeing the Indian market, but I think for a long time it was the UK because of the complicated and long connection between the UK and India. So I know, for example, one of my colleagues, a guy called David Davidar, who came to Canada from India. He used to run Penguin India, but he's also an author. His agent was a British agent because he had been pitched stuff by this agent for many years when he was the publisher. And then when he became a writer, it was his favorite agent. So he called him, he said, by the way, I'm sending you something I want you to look at. And the agent said, yeah, I like it. Who is this person? I want to sign them. And he said, oh, well, that's easy. That's me. So he tricked them. He knew that it was a complicated relationship that he had with this person. So he didn't want to tell them who he was. So he put it under a fake name so that the guy would accept it based on its merits. So I feel like there's a very close connection. I think somebody like Salman Rushdie had another agent in India, but he moved to an American agent who really wanted him and kind of wooed him. So I don't know, in terms of, I think the Indian market is so big, especially because of the English readership there. I don't know what to say. I had a friend tell me once that if we wanted to open an office in India, we'd be overwhelmed and have like a huge agency in no time. The Rights Factory India, but it's not something that I'm thinking about right now. I feel what you have to do is query the people who are going to like your manuscript. And I think more and more in the last 10 years, it doesn't matter where anybody is anymore because so much of our business is by email. I would say 80% of what I do now is by email. So if you wanted to send me a manuscript, you'd query me. If I wanted to look at it, that would all be done by email. If I decided to sign you and I said, I love your novel, then I would submit it by email. So it's all email. It doesn't really matter where anybody is as long as they respect the time zones. And it's only when you have to call somebody you need to know what time it is. Oh, I can't hear you. You're muted.
So I just had one more thing to ask you. It'll be very quick. So I submitted to around 30 agents, and 15 of them asked me for the full manuscript, and then a further 7 of them asked me for a revised manuscript. And I'm at a complete loss because I don't know what to do now. So what would you advise in terms of revising manuscripts?
So the 7 people that wanted revised manuscripts, how different are the revisions that they're asking for?
They're pretty much the same thing, but
Really?
They're not specific. So I'm struggling to sort of identify the areas. They're very general, so sort of struggling.
So my advice would be to taking that advice, and if you could do a revision that is your best revision following that advice, resubmit it to the 7, and then you're likely to get 1 or 2. Probably 5 of them will say, yeah, I thought this might work, but it's not working for me. But 1 or 2 will say either this is perfect or it needs a little more, and then they might be a little more specific. But I think that your book will be improved because if 7 people are saying the same thing, it means you missed something before you submitted it. What the more complicated situation would be if you had 7 people with completely wildly different plans for revising it. Like, somebody says you need to change this, this makes no sense. There was no way you could reconcile that kind of feedback to make one manuscript. That would be a big problem. That means that you had so many things essentially wrong that it never should have gone out. The fact that everybody's coming back with the same thing, I would take that as a very encouraging sign.
Thank you very much.
Oh, and if you've got 7 agents looking at it, send it to us. You can look up the Rights Factory. I want to be in on that. Make us number 8 when you have the revision.
Okay, thank you. I will.
Okay.
Thanks, Prajita. I have Lynn Hutchinson Lee next about agents and publishers in the era of coronavirus. Lynn, you're
we
muted.
can't hear you.
You're muted, Lynn. I can unmute you from this side. Hang on. There we go. Should be able to hear you now.
Okay. Yeah,
Gotcha.
I'm just curious about that because some publishers seem to be saying, "Oh, we're going online. We're not really moving at this point." Just wondering what the status is these days. Does it vary from publisher and agent to publisher and agent, or is there a general consensus?
There's no consensus, but I can tell you that a lot of the smaller publishers are struggling right now because there's no money coming in from bookstores except for online sales and special orders. So because of the bookstores have been closed now for a month in some states or provinces. So it's a little tricky. I think the bigger publishers, it's business as usual. What they've had to adjust to is working at home. And the letters I'm getting from the publishers are like, we're still buying books, you know, we're just having to figure out how to do everything online now. And like the Penguin Random Houses or HarperCollins and Macmillan's of the world, they have, you know, tens of millions of dollars allocated for every one of their publishing imprints to buy books every year. They have a huge machine to feed. So they're not going to stop buying. What they are going to do is prioritize the authors that they're already working with that are making money for them. And I think the tricky thing is if you're a new author, it's a tough spot because, you know, it's riskier now than it was before. It was always risky being a new author, but they might just say, well, if we have the next book by Dan Brown, we'd rather spend our entire publishing budget of $20 or $30 million. Actually, I think he's more than that now. It might have to be 100 million to get the next Dan Brown book. But we'd rather spend the money on that rather than, you know, 1,000 books that are $100,000 each. So they have to make that calculation in their heads. Smaller publishers are telling us that there's no acquisitions until September at the least. So they're being really honest. They're saying, we don't know, you know, we're talking to our banks. We're looking for if there's any government loan or subsidy programs. A lot of publishers are taking advantage of putting people on furlough or laying people off so that they can be covered while they're recovering the business. This furlough thing is interesting to me. It's a UK word where they basically give you a leave of absence, and then the government will pay 80% of your salary. So what a lot of the publishers have done is they've said, we're putting you on furlough, so it's a leave of absence. You're not working for us for a while, but we're going to top up what the government is going to give you so you keep your full salary. So they're basically saving 80% of their salary expenses by putting people on furlough. There have been some layoffs, though, to be fair.
Well, the larger publishers, of course, require an agent, and the smaller publishers very often don't. So I guess, you know, one really does have to navigate through an agent in order to get published at this time, I would imagine.
Well, yeah, the reason is that there are about 30 million writers in North America, and there are probably about 300 editors. So if you look at the numbers, there's no way they can ever deal with that. So they're counting on people like me, you know, and there's probably about 800, maybe 800 agents around the world. They're counting on those 800 people to find the best stuff and bring it to them. It's also why one of the reasons I love having lunches with editors is that they always pay. They're like, I'm buying you lunch. I want you to send me something great. Was there another part of the question, or are we good?
Nope, that's it. That's it.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Lynn. Next, I had 2 questions from Yaz M. Would you like to ask one of those, Yaz?
Yeah.
Still around? There we go.
Yeah. Okay. Hello, and thanks So I have a question about, I guess, the response that agents give to queries when they say that it doesn't fit my list or it doesn't fit my list right now, when the reason why a writer might query them is because they looked at Query Tracker or their wish list and, you know, their websites and stuff like that. So I'm wondering, you know, especially from you, if you kind of give that kind of response, is it because, you know, it doesn't fit the list, or is it because you just don't like it and you just don't want to say, you know what, I don't like your stuff? Or because
Well, it's hard to tell people that you don't like their stuff. Usually, I don't think I've ever said that, because it's not about me liking their stuff. It's about, is this something that I could get excited about? Like, I want to be excited. So it's usually, I have no feelings about something, except for if I feel like if I feel like a little tingly around it, I'm like, oh, there's something about this person's doing. So if it's fiction, I'm looking for usually some humor and a warm character who's, when I enter into their space, I feel like it's really engaging. And, you know, half of my stuff is funny. If somebody can make me laugh, I'm like, this is so funny. I love it. But, you know, I have a very wide range. Like, I think I have on my list, like, commercial fiction, crime, mystery, graphic novels, memoir, literary fiction. So those are very generic terms. So if I say, you know, this doesn't fit my list, all I'm trying to say is, sometimes I think it's a way that agents have to say, I don't have a vision for how I could sell this book, or it doesn't excite me enough to want to take it on. Because the thing is, when you take on a book and an author, it is a huge responsibility, because now you have to figure out what to do with it. You have to either, you know, put it through an editorial process if it's not ready, or if it is ready, figure out who to get it to. And then that takes up time with the editors and your own time, which means that there's something else that you can't work on. There's that opportunity cost of when you take something on. So I wouldn't take it too badly. It's definitely not personal. It's not about the work. All it is about is an agent saying, is this a project that I could see myself being engaged with for 3 or 4 months or more, or a year, and that I think I could really sell at the end of it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Yaz. Next, I had one from Mark Braidwood. Did you want to ask your question, Mark?
Yeah, thanks. So first time author, I've got a novel that I've been trying to pitch to a number of agents and haven't had any luck. I did make that mistake of probably going a bit too early, but I've tried to sort of think about what might make it a bit more saleable. But it strikes me that as a first-time author, you're in a pretty difficult position, because you've got that classic thing as a job seeker, oh, well, come back to me when you've got more experience, but how do you get experience?
Yeah, exactly. That's the same thing.
Right. So how do you, so I wonder whether I'm even getting through the first read, or, you know, like if anyone.
What kind of book do you have?
It's sort of science fiction or spec fic. Yeah. It doesn't have a killer premise, but, you know, I think there's something there, but I'm not getting any traction at all.
Well, your pitch, saying it doesn't have a killer premise, is probably not a good way to position it.
Yeah, well, I don't say that.
What is the strength of it then?
The ideas in it, the writing. I mean, it's got a character arc, it's got plot, it's a thriller in its sort of tone.
So like a thriller sci-fi. So focus on the strengths. You know, if you're going to try to get an agent, you need to write a great query letter. And is there anything you can compare it to in the sci-fi world or the thriller world where it's like, you know?
Well, I would call it The Martian Meets Dances with Wolves, but I'm not sure if that's going to stick.
Well, that's not a bad pitch. I kind of get the, you know, I can see Matt Damon and Kevin Costner both when you say that. So, yeah, what you need to do is focus on what it is that's unique and original about what you're trying to do, and then who you are, and then find somebody that gets that. Now, have you published anything before? Do you have any kind of, like, let's say, endorsements from other writers, people in the community, or mentors, or other, you know?
Well, I've recently
community?
Yeah, I've kind of switched strategies to writing shorts, and I've got a short coming out in Polar Borealis this month. And
see, that's great. You're building attraction. You're building a career as a writer by getting smaller publications leading up to the big one. Agents like to see that.
Yeah, that's what I figured. Okay, cool. Thanks.
I just think, yeah, I think you just need to focus on writing the best query letter you can and finding people. Like, I'd have to say sci-fi is a weakness at our agency.
Well, I've just seen Natalie Kimber does. Is she still?
She's still there. Yeah, you could, if she's interested, you should definitely query her.
Okay. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks, Mark. So we have Kelsey Chase next with the question about how to find the right agent.
Yeah, I was just wondering, what's your favorite source that you like to use that you could give to other writers, trying to just make sure that we get our voice out there, but pitch the right people?
Oh, okay. So the thing that I can't live without is something called Publishers Marketplace. The problem is it requires a subscription, but what it has is it's a database that's about 16 or 17 years old now, of every single editor and agent and book and what they've all bought, like what deals have people done, including right up to like yesterday. If you were to pay for the subscription fee and log on to Publishers Marketplace, just publishersmarketplace.com, what you'd see is that it's something that I use every day to figure out, are there new editors buying things that I'm interested, things that I have to sell? Are there new people that are expanding? Have they got a new job? So I'm tracking all that. And for writers, it's a very powerful tool because it shows you what agents are selling what. So so that's the one tool. But to be completely fair, that's not my way of getting, like, that's what I think would be useful to you. Okay. But my way of getting clients is very old-fashioned, and it's because I've had so many writers that I've worked with when I was a publisher and now as an agent. So it's like a 30-some-odd year career. But over that time, I've met so many people, and a lot of them just will keep referring people back to me. So a lot of writers become teachers, and then they meet somebody and they're like, oh, I think my agent would really like this. Or even people that, well, I mean, it's normal for me to get something from somebody that's my client saying, hey, I think my agent would really love this. Can I pass it on to them? But what's really weird is in the last couple of years, I'm getting people like other agents are saying, this isn't right for me, but I think you might want to try Sam because he did this thing or they did that. So I'm getting references that other agents are passing on to me. So I feel like that's my number one way of getting stuff. And I think I hinted at this earlier. I'm getting a bunch of people now that have become unhappy with their first or last agent, or whatever that agent is in their career. And they're saying, you know, I'm looking for something new. I need a change. Is there something, you know, I've heard good things about you. Is my work something you might be interested in? Can we do something together? So in which case I'll say, well, I need to know exactly what the situation is with your current agent. And sometimes, I mean, this one thing happened where somebody's like, oh my God, I don't think my agent gets my work. And I looked at it and I said, you know what? I don't get it either. I don't think it's your agent. I think it's your work. And then they went back to their agent and they said, you're right. I talked to my agent and they still love me. And I'm sorry that I bothered you. And we're going to fix this. So, I mean, it's not like I'm a therapist for writers, but sometimes I feel like I am. I'm just unpaid, you know, unpaid therapy over here.
Can I just do a small follow-up question?
Sure.
That kind of, what's your recommendation about how many agents should you query at a time? Should you just go for your top 30 or whatever? And in a follow-up to that, how long should you wait for a response? Because sometimes they don't respond.
Sometimes we don't respond. That is true.
Yes.
So
how long should you wait and just move on?
So I would say, I wouldn't suggest, I think 30 is a high number. I feel like if you do your homework, there should probably be 10 people that you really want. And I would do it in 10. So I'd say send it out to 10 first, see what the response is. Follow the instructions that they have on their websites or Query Tracker or whatever online resource you're using, and see what kind of response you get. And if not, try the next batch. And always keep in mind that if you don't get a response, if somebody's interested, you can always follow up and say, hey, I sent you this query like 2 months ago. One of the agents I just contacted, they might not have been being your first batch. It could be like plan B, are interested in representing me. I wanted to circle back to you. I get this email sometimes and I'll often be forced to make a decision at that point. And most of the times, if it hasn't already struck me as being the right book, like I don't want to give too much away here, so I'll be very general because this is, I think you're recording this, right, Mike?
Yes, I am.
So a writer sent me something that was very specific to a certain place and time. And even though I love the writing, even though this person had been published widely in lots of reputable magazines and online places, it was too specific for me. And I said, this is about something that happened in a southern state in the US a long time ago. I've never been to that state. It's not really my thing. It's really well written, but so I was kind of thinking about it, like, how big is the market? Is this something I really could get behind? And to be completely honest, agents consider things such as, how many countries will this be translatable in? Because there's so much more money when there is that possibility. And is there a possible film or TV show or documentary in this? So when I kind of run it through that checklist that I have, it kind of came out quiet. And then a week later, I got a note saying, hey, I got an agent who's interested in this. So I'd rather go with you because you've got more experience or whatever. And I said, you know what? It's not for me. If you have an agent that's excited about it and is giving you a very enthusiastic response, you should do that. So you should approach a reasonable number of people. I'm not going to give you a number. I'm just going to say what you think is reasonable. What you shouldn't do is, and I tell this every time I give this talk, is you shouldn't do is like one email where you don't know how to use the BCC field and have everybody 100 agents in the to field so we can all see who else you sent it to.
Right.
And it says, dear agent, I'm a genius. This book will make you $1 million, because those I just delete.
Okay, perfect. So about like 2 months, if you really haven't heard.
I would say the best follow-up is somebody else wants to represent it, because then they'll act right away. One thing that might happen, which is noteworthy here, and I'll mention it, is sometimes if an agent gets really excited about it, they'll say, can I have this on an exclusive? And then you'll have to tell them that a few people have got it, but you won't send it to anybody else, because they want to know that it's kind of like dating, It's like, are we just dating, or are we going to be exclusive now? So they want to know, sometimes that if you're going to be more serious about it.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thanks for that. I'm going to jump around if you guys don't mind, because I'm seeing some themes in the questions and some really relevant stuff coming up. So maybe, can I go to Maggie, who's asked about own voices?
Hi.
Hi.
It's nice talking to you again. Nice to see your face. From like the talks that you've done, and from Ali and from Alicia, I understand that like own voices is really big right now, and like as a writer of color, that's really applicable to me, and I love that, and I love getting behind that. But something I'm kind of concerned about is that our like agents and editors, are they kind of enforcing ideas about what it is to be a person from a certain group? So like, I'm Chinese, are they enforcing kind of stereotypes and that kind of thing? Are they saying things like, this book isn't Chinese enough? And it's like, but how I am Chinese, how, like, do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean. And I think that it's not really our job to enforce anything. So we're looking at the work, and we're looking for a kind of authenticity. And the reason why I think own voices became really important is that having somebody from a different group writing about a group where they haven't really done their homework. Like, if you guys have been following this American Dirt thing that happened recently, it's a really good example of all the things that can go wrong when you make assumptions about another culture. And so publishers have become, I think for a long time in the young adult world, it was a big deal, and the adult world didn't really care about it. They're like, we don't really care, just write a great story, and we don't care who you are. Like, you could write crazy. Like, I honestly think that Crazy Rich Asians, if that person who wrote it wasn't Asian, would never have worked, right? Like, it had a sense of authenticity, so they want the authenticity. But I don't think that they were holding the books to the same own voices standards until American Dirt came out, and then they realized that a bunch of people had recommended it, including Oprah, without really necessarily reading it or paying too much attention to it, other than it was a great story. and looking at how they marketed it. So I feel like your job as a writer is to write the book that you want to write with characters that, you know, I had a writer who wrote an Aboriginal character, and it wasn't Aboriginal. So what she did was she actually went to an Aboriginal group and said, I want you to vet this for me and support it, and I'll fix whatever you tell me I've got wrong. And they did. They said, actually, this wouldn't happen, but this. So I feel like what it means is you just have to do your homework more. You know, like fiction is about making stuff up, but if you make stuff up that makes no sense, it hurts the book in the long run. Or if it's something that somebody, if you're writing about another culture and somebody from that culture could catch it, I think that what we're seeing is nobody wants to be caught that way anymore, and the publishers don't want to be part of it. So all they're saying is, you know, if you're from this culture, then no problem, we get it. This is your story. If you're writing from another culture, I feel like you can do some of that, but each case is gonna be it's gonna be its own thing. Like, it's gonna depend on how much of another culture you're writing about, what is known about. If it's historical, how much can you get into it? One thing I've noticed is in film and TV, it's more there about the writers and the actors than the creators, because the creators, if you're Steven Spielberg, he'll just do whatever he wants, you know, or Quentin Tarantino. They can explore what other cultures they want. Nobody's going to complain about it. But in the book world, they tend to. So I feel like there's different rules that are being applied across the board. But generally, you shouldn't feel like you're going to be judged, I think, unfairly for what you write, if that's what your question is.
Well, I was more concerned that there's like a lot of, well, some of the things I've seen from like my spaces as like from Living Hyphen and the folks who do those kinds of things, and they started those magazines because there are like writers and editors and agents and stuff like that who read a piece, and because it doesn't fit their like stereotypes of what a Chinese character or a Chinese Canadian character would experience, they say it's not Chinese enough, even when it's coming from like a Chinese author.
That seems really odd to me. I don't know who those people are, but I think that they are bad agents.
Yeah, but from what it
They
sounds
shouldn't
like,
be judging you. They shouldn't be trying to enforce stereotypes, for one thing. That makes no sense to me.
yeah, but from what you said, it sounds like the focus is authenticity. So I like that, and I think that probably means that this thing I'm concerned about isn't happening.
You should, I mean, it's hard enough to be a writer. You shouldn't have anxiety that if you're going to be mistaken to be not Chinese enough. I mean, like you just have to write what you know best and what you care about, and try to make something that whoever starts reading is like, oh my God, Maggie, this is brilliant. I can't stop reading it, you know, like.
Cool, thank you.
And if you get into genre stuff, I don't think it matters as much, you know, with the genre stuff. It's like whatever if it's going to be a vampire story, it's a vampire story first, and then an own voices story after.
Interesting. Okay, cool.
Thanks, Maggie. Good to see you again. Can we bounce to Ilham? She has another question that's related while we're on the theme. Ilham, are you there? You might be muted. Oh, you're muted. I'll unmute you. There, you're live. Go for it.
I'm here. Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Sam, for doing the session today. I just want to ask again another Own Voices theme question here. So, given the the COVID-19 climate and the economic recession, the deep economic recession we're expecting, are you seeing a trend towards publishers not so much now favoring works from debut, unknown, small-time authors, especially when it comes to like own voices stories and stories that are really not actually based in Canada or in the diaspora? But
no, I don't think that's true. I think the advantage now, especially after American Dirt, is more and more editors at the big houses are looking for those stories, because they're saying, we need to address this, we need to fix this. There's all these people that are, I'm assuming that it's a brilliant, like the quality has to be there, but like I just pointed out, I have a friend, let me see if I can find this. This was something that I just pointed out to I have a friend who is from this, let me just find this here. Yeah, okay. So he is from Lahore,
Okay.
and in Pakistan. And when I met him, he said, you know, I want to tell the story about the red light district in Lahore, but he never did. He ended up doing something else. He wrote this other thing, and he never went there. And then I read this deal that a writer who happens to be probably a genius writer, because this woman, her name is Amina Ahmad, she won what's called a Stegner Fellowship, which is, for those of you in the MFA world, if you want to do a writing degree at Stanford University, if you apply, you have to send, you send an application and you send a manuscript. And I think they have 3 Stegner Fellows a year.
Wow.
But it's 3 only. So out of the thousands of thousands they get, and it's free. So they're basically saying, you know, Wallace Stegner was a teacher here, and we wanted to name a fellowship after him because he taught at Stanford for like 25 years or something. So what they're saying is, if you become a Stegner Fellow, we pay for everything. You're our guest. So this woman, her name was Amina Ahmad, she went to the University of Iowa writing program and did an MFA there, and then used her work from there to become a Stegner Fellow at Stanford. And then she wrote a book called The Walled City. And the story is about a detective who is sent to hush up the murder of a child prostitute in Lahore's red light district, and finds himself in an unexpected reckoning with his origins. So I saw this and I thought, so this is somebody who theoretically, I'm assuming this, I don't know this, who has experience with this part of the world, but has been vetted by 2 major American institutions. One is the Iowa Writing Program, and the second is Stanford University. And then it was sold to Riverhead. Riverhead, of course, is the publisher of The Kite Runner,
Okay.
and one of the biggest American imprints of Penguin. So it was sold to there, and it was sold by a woman called Ayesh Panda. So Ayesh Panda is I know her, she is a mixed, half American, half Indian woman. So she's definitely been looking for own voices herself and bringing those to the market now that she sees there's this opportunity. I feel like for a long time there was always an opportunity for people that were talented, but I think now they want to avoid the criticism after the fact, and they're also more enlightened about their own vetting process. Like one of the things that American Dirt was revealed from American Dirt is, if you have a bunch of kind of upper middle class editors reading about a Mexican immigrant, they don't necessarily know what their experience is, and there was a bunch of things that were just off, you know, and so nobody caught that until the reviewers started to say, this seemed weird to me, like how could this have happened, you know, this. So yeah, so I think even if you may think it's a bad time, I think it's a great time. You just have to tell the story the best you can. Obviously, it has to be a brilliant story. It's just an advantage now as opposed to a disadvantage, I think.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Ilham. So Sam, we're at the hour, but are we okay to keep going for a few more questions?
Yeah, let's go. How many questions are there?
There's a number, but I'll try to group them as much as possible.
Yeah,
for
sure,
those of you
combine them if you can.
Yeah, I will. I absolutely will. For those of you that do need to bounce to another session, please check us out at soyouwanttowrite.org. Some of the things that we're doing lately, we have a lot of new workshops online, of course, coming out. Sam is available for one-on-one sessions by Skype to look at your manuscript. And also we have our flagship program coming up. It's a 12-week intensive writer coaching program for 6 to 8 writers only. And that goes for 12 weeks. We're starting on May 23rd for whoever's ready to take a real stab at their book and getting it finished and published. So check that out on our website. Otherwise, let's move back to questions. And I think if we can go to Rania Higgs, you had a question about using a pen name. And I think Charlotte Lee's question was quite similar. So what about the legal ramifications of people naming the book? So maybe Rania, do you want to ask that question?
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for having me. My question is, well, I'm a high school teacher and I've been teaching for about 10 years now. And my book is going to be sort of upper young adults, new adults fiction. And I'm concerned that the content, particularly, for example, the swearing, I'm worried about how that's maybe going to clash with my job. So the easiest way out of that would be using a pen name. However, I have been teaching for 10 years and I've moved around a bunch of schools. I'm currently in Vietnam, so I've taught in a few countries. I feel like I'd be losing out on a huge readership and almost free advertising. So I already have a base of potential readers. How would an agent advise me? Like, would it be worth using a pen name and saying we're not going with the built-in readership, or should we take the?
So this is a weakness in terms of my own background and experience, which is I only have a few YA authors, and I've done like 1 or 2 middle grade books. So I'm not the best person to ask the question. So given that, if you came to me with this issue, I would say I would need to understand more about how you see the threat to your career from the writing. Like, people, I think, in the modern world can separate a work of art from the person.
Okay.
Do you feel like it would just mean you're unhireable? Like, I wrote this book and people are swearing. Don't people swear in your classrooms? I mean,
they're not allowed to. They probably do. My grasp of Vietnamese is not very good, so they're probably swearing constantly. I am worried that it would make me possibly more difficult to hire. I would like to be at the stage where I can write full time, but I know that's unlikely for the foreseeable future.
Tell me a little more about the book. Is there something else that you feel other than the language that would make it like a barrier to you getting steady work?
No, I don't think so. I'm actually really excited about it. So I'm half British, half Jordanian, so I'm mixed race. And I feel there's a lack of characters like that, particularly Arab characters in modern fiction. So my character is going to be very much based on sort of the pre-Islamic, pre-Christian mythologies of the Nabateans who built Petra and lived in Wadi Rum and all those incredible places. So in that respect, I'm not worried about it, because it's definitely, it's a love letter to Jordan in my words, because I absolutely love the place. But in my outline, it looks that it's going to be the first part of the trilogy. And I'm thinking there might be more intimate scenes in the 3rd book.
Yeah, well, there's no problem with that in upper YA.
Yeah, I would get that, but as a teacher, if I worked in marketing or sales or something like that, I guess it'd be fine. But
yeah, I don't see that. I don't see that it's an issue, and I guess it's maybe my lack of understanding. But I also feel like it's the kind of thing that the conversation you'd have with not just your agent, but with a publisher, because I feel like they wouldn't want to have somebody that wasn't behind the book either. So I feel like what you should do is write the best book you can and put everything that you think needs to be there. Of course, it can't be gratuitous. It has to be genuinely important to the story. And then find somebody that will champion it and think that hopefully some big publisher will want it, on bookstores. And then I think you may be overthinking it, and that is that I can't see how somebody can judge you or make you unhireable based on a work of art that you made. I just can't see that, but maybe I'm being idealistic, and in the real world that happens all the time.
I choose to believe in your version of the world.
How far along this book are you?
Not very. I've written the first few chapters and I've outlined the whole trilogy. So
when you have the first book, I think one of my agents might be interested in it. If you look it up at the Rights Factory, her name is Stacy Kondla, Kondla. She's looking for more like interesting places. Like, she loves travel. Well, back when you could travel, like, I think a story based in Jordan or having a Jordanian or half Jordanian character she'd really be into it. So I think you should try her.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thanks, Rania. So if I could go to Alex Hughes now. Alex had a question about how helpful is it to be kind of shortlisted for a prize or a sponsorship. And I know, Rania, you had a similar question about submitting for competition. So if I could maybe ask Alex to ask the question.
Yeah, so there's the competition going on with the WriteHive group at the moment, and I've made it through to the final stage. One of the 3 people through to that stage. Is that, or even possibly, winning that, would that be something useful for me to like put in query letters with agents?
Absolutely. And any way that you have to identify yourself as being special or standing out in a crowd, or like I was telling Mark earlier, if you have like a mentor blurb your book, if you have any kind of accolade or acclaim or praise, if you've been shortlisted for anything, if you've won an award, all that stuff is really important, because what it means is to us is that there were like maybe, I mean, how many people in this conference this weekend with you guys? Is it like 1,000, 500, 50?
I think it's like 500 at the moment.
It's up to 600 now.
600. Oh my God. So what you're telling me, I might even include that. I would say winner of the whatever, or shortlisted out of like whatever number, so that I would just say, do I want to read something that won out of like 500 entries? That's, of course, I'd say I'd want to take a look at it, because it means that you've already come pre-vetted. It's the same with people that win awards. People that win awards all the time get looked at better, faster than people that don't have any kind of acclaim or, credit like that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Why don't I go down my list again, and we'll go to Celia Reeves. Are older writers at a disadvantage? Celia, did you want to pop your head up? Oh, you're muted. I'll unmute you. Here we go. Oh, still muted. Still muted. Okay, try now.
Did that do it?
We got it, yeah.
All right, great, thank you. This is my 3rd separate platform on today in WriteHive. So, us old folks, we are definitely on board with this new stuff. My question is about me as an older person, and I recently retired, and I'm going through the last pass of a novel before I send it out to my beta group for the 2nd time. I mean, it's definitely being polished. But my concern is I often hear agents say that they're looking to work with a writer on a long-term career to help shape their whole career. Is that automatically going to make an agent not interested in me? Because I mean, I don't have a whole handful of decades left for me to continue writing.
So that's a good question. And I feel like the agents that are saying that, what they're thinking about is that, so I mentioned earlier, like, for example, The Hobbit, the first book sold 400 copies, and then it took a while, and then it sold like a few thousand. And then by then you had the first book for Lord of the Rings. And then now, of course, it's in the hundreds of millions of books that have sold, and his family have been living off the money, that he made. So, what we're thinking about when we say that is we want to know that you're not just going to write one book and say, oh, there, I wrote my book and I'm done, I'll see you later. We often lose money on the first book, because if you send me a book and I like it, I'm like, oh, I want to work with this. So what I want to, it's not an age thing. Don't think of it as being an age thing. Think of it as like, I'm going to write more books. That's what they really mean. It's not because the age doesn't matter. There are lots of people that get published, in their 60s or older, especially since people are living longer, but also because the book is good. That's what matters. So if you find somebody that believes in the book and they can get in the hands of a publisher and it comes out, all they want to know, because, and I'll be completely frank as an agent here, doing the first deal is often very hard. And if the author succeeds, doing the next deal is very easy. So what we see is that our return on investment for the first deal may be very expensive. It may take months and months of work to get that small little commission that we get from your advance. But then if the book takes off a year down the road or 2 years down the road, we have the new book. And now the money is going to be ideally double or triple with no effort, because now the editor edits, because we found you an editor at like Penguin, let's say, or Macmillan. And this has happened to me a couple times where once I've got the relationship and everybody's working, it's really just me advising the author on their platform and their marketing decisions. And you know, do we like this cover or that? Because they're now being published regularly and they have something going on. That's like the sweet spot for an agent, because we got them the deal. We're there if something goes wrong, like if the publisher says, we don't want your next book. And then meanwhile, we're kind of like a talent manager, helping somebody be a more commercially successful artist.
That sounds great. So my plan is, because once I
So
start,
just don't ever say that you're going to write one book and then retire. Say you're going to write as many, but now that you're retired, you're going to write as many books as you can.
Yeah. This book has it ends with obvious sequel possibilities, but I'm not going to start writing the sequel right away, because if someone doesn't like this book, the sequel would never sell. But my plan is to start writing another book as soon as I start submitting this, because it will be on submission for months and months and months. I'm not going to sit
Yeah,
around
I think
doing
that
nothing.
might be a good little thing to note in your query letter, that, you know, as well as finishing this book, you've now started another one in your work, you know, whatever, so that they know that you're serious about this.
All right, so I hadn't thought of putting that in the query letter. I had figured definitely, if I get a phone call, I would definitely say that. But
No, it's like,
query
I
letter,
love,
okay?
yeah, I talked to a writer the other day who's like, here's my book. By the way, I'm halfway through this other book. And I said, actually, your new book sounds even more exciting than the first book. So I kind of, you know, I'm like, can I read that? They're like, no, it's not ready. But I mean, now I'm looking at somebody with 2 books to sell rather than just 1 book.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Julia. Can we go to Sarah K next? She has a question about, is a career as a marketer appealing to agents? Are you there, Sarah?
Hello, I'm here.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. So yeah, I have a career as a digital marketer, and I was wondering if that type of career, even though it's not necessarily the literary career, is attractive to agents, because, you know, we're somebody who can help promote our book and have those skills.
So yeah, I would say that instead of saying it, you should show it. You should say that, you know, I've been writing this book and here's my query letter, but meanwhile, I have been building my, you know, online platform or my website or my social media. So I would assume that if you have those skills, that you could apply them to yourself as a brand, as an author, as a personality, and that you're already doing all the things that a good writer should be doing to build a platform. So that I think it would be very impressive to an agent if you said, you know, because I do this in my day job, I've been doing it for myself, and I now have, you know, a mailing list of 20,000 people that'll read whatever I want, you know, because they'll love that. I mean, I sold a book by a personal trainer who had a mailing list that was significant, and it was the mailing list that the publisher said, this is great. So, I mean, if you're writing fiction, it's a little different, but they still want to see that. I mean, nowadays, if we get a query, and if and when we send your manuscript to a publisher, everybody's doing the same thing. They're Googling you. They're saying, who is this person online? Like, what's their social media? What does their website look like? How do they promote themselves? How do they portray themselves online? What's their online brand? So if you can use those things rather than saying, hey, I also happen to do this in my day job and I can use it when the time comes, that's not going to be enough. What you want to do is be using it now so that you can blow them away, and they'll say, oh my God, this person's doing all this stuff on Instagram, or they're doing this thing or that thing that most writers aren't.
Great, thank you so much.
Okay.
Thanks, Sarah. How about Megan Burnell? Are you there, Megan?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Awesome. Sorry, I had headphones on to try to block out the L, so this is a little new for me. This question has been touched on already by a couple other people, so I don't want to, you know, belabor the point too much. But I am querying a project right now. I've sent out, I guess I'm on round 2 or maybe 3, just sending out a few, 5 or 6 at a time, and I'm getting really the same boilerplate in all of the rejections I've gotten. And I just want a translation. I want to make sure I understand what I'm being told, because the phrase I keep hearing is, doesn't capture my imagination. So I just want to make sure that that means quite literally what's being said.
I think you might have a bad pitch in your query. Do you have the part of your query where you describe the book?
I do.
Just read it to me.
Oh my God, not to put me on the spot or anything, right?
No pressure at all.
Sorry, I did not realize you were going to do this, so
Well, it's part of the joy of being interactive, right? Like, obviously, this is part of the fun of it.
Right? I feel kind of silly I didn't have this open now. Oh, okay. Oh my gosh, this is very weird and discomforting. Okay, so the first thing a wise person asks when meeting someone new is, who's paying you? Unfortunately for Morrow, this truism belongs to the man who's swindling him. Jalen fled the land of his birth 9 years ago and now makes a living selling magic illegally in the empire next door. He's tracked Morrow down at the isolated monastery where he was raised in ignorance of his identity by the will of his father, the premier, true, who hired Jalen, false, to retrieve his bastard son to inherit the throne. Now he's dying. The heir murdered his younger brother. He's alive, and assassins are just days behind. Nope.
Okay, that's enough. I can tell you. So what they're saying is that you're getting into so many details so fast without us feeling something for the character or feeling some kind of empathy or understanding what the character's journey is going to be and what's at stake. So I understand what you're trying to do, which is to make it really dramatic and compelling, but you're failing because we're not getting a sense of who this person is and what their values are and what they're going to have to fight. So what you need is a better elevator pitch. So Megan, when somebody says, what's the elevator pitch for your book? You need to come up with something where you're going to start and they're going to just be totally interested, and then you're going to keep going, and then you go, oh my God, keep going. Like, what is, this sounds awesome. The way you have it now by saying this person has to figure this out with this, and then we're like, where are we? Like, I don't know where we are automatically. And then it gets more complicated because then you start figuring where you're telling us what's true and what isn't, but we still don't even know where we are.
Okay.
So you see what I'm saying? You need to situate us in a position where we can feel kind of seduced into this storyline, and we're like, oh, I'll go with you, So maybe look at if there is a, so Mike, will you remind me, we can also send out the Writer's Digest columns of queries that worked.
Yeah,
if you
great.
guys don't know this, it's a great resource. The first one was about, I better make a note of this myself. The first one was how $300,000 got spent. And the second one will be query letters. So yeah, Writer's Digest has an amazing column that they do off and on, which is, here's an actual query letter. Here's what the writer sent the agent. Here's what the agent responded with. And here's the book that came out of it. So it is like a dissection of this whole thing. For all of you, I think it would be a great resource. So I'm going to send you that link. If you Google it, I think you just have to type in Writer's Digest query letters that worked, and you'll eventually find it. But we'll send it anyway. So what you want to do is study any query letter that has, like, it sounds like this is a adult fantasy book.
It is.
So you want to look at how adult fantasy books have been pitched. And I would even say, not just the query letter, but go online and look on Amazon at some of your favorite queries and see how the catalog copy that the publisher and the author came up with to describe the book. See how that kind of entices you into this world and makes you understand what's at stake for the character. So you're like, oh, I want to read this book. There's enough there that there's going to be eventually this ultimate battle between this person and their evil, it sounds like in this case, like some kind of doppelganger or somebody competing for something, their own resources, so that you can explain what that is, so that rather than getting into the details without an emotional engagement, it's better to have an emotional engagement first and then give people only what they need to know to make them say, oh my God, I want to read that story. Having said that, I'll give you the biggest kind of high concept pitch that for a sci-fi novel that was a 7-figure pitch. Anytime this author, now to be fair, this was a screenwriter, this was a filmmaking author, so they knew how to pitch and they had lots of practice doing it. But this was one of the biggest books a few years ago, and this was how simple the pitch was. The pitch was this guy through a portal accidentally finds himself in an alternate version of his original world. But this world is much darker and way more dangerous, and he's going to have to figure out how to survive this world and get back to his world. And the catch is, the world that he finds himself in that's dangerous is our world. And everybody's like, oh, I want to read that book. Like, what's this other world? Where does he live? Where's he from? How's our world dangerous and compared to that one? You know, so people love that pitch, and it was his bidding wars everywhere based on a pitch.
And if your query is not great, I mean, you don't even get to a writing sample at that point, right? I mean, it's kind of like a tier.
We use the query.
Start with the letter.
We use the query. It's kind of like as a way to say, is this person really done enough work in their query to get my attention? Even though that's not really fair, because you could have done the work in the manuscript, but you have to do as much work in the query, so that, because that's all we have to judge you. We might, if there's something interesting about you, Google you, or if you can say you can read more about me online or whatever, you know, we might do that. But really, we want to know, like, if I was somebody that was interested in adult fantasy, so here's an example. If you open that by saying, you know, like, what's your favorite fantasy series? Or what's the closest fantasy series that you can think of that you could compare your work to?
Well, I actually have a comp off the top of my head, thanks to doing PitMad. The comps I used were Amber meets Shattered Pillars.
Yeah, open with that. I didn't hear that in your pitch.
I didn't use it. Sorry, that was something I came up with for when I tried PitMad on Twitter.
Yeah, sometimes having the brevity forces creativity. You know, that's why we like poetry. Okay, does that answer your question?
Yes, it did.
Great.
Very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. Do you want to do one or two more, Sam?
Yeah, let's go till 2:30.
Okay, let's go to Anna Gearing, please.
Hi, yes, thank you for having me. So I'm currently a creative writing student, and I'm working on the second manuscript of one of my books. And I was wondering whether or not if literary agents would be turned off by a book that has once been on a free-to-read website like Wattpad in an early version of its draft.
That's a kind of double-edged thing, that they would be interested if you had like 500,000 or 1 million readers, and if you only had like 8 readers, they'd say no. So because they'd say you kind of had your shot, nobody was interested, and it's over.
Mm-hmm.
How many readers did you have?
A lot. I'd have to check again.
But more than
every
like,
time I look at it, it's.
Is it more than 500,000?
Yeah, it's last time I looked, it was 4K.
4K, meaning 4,000 or?
Yes, I think. Sorry, I can actually check.
No, but okay. So 4K is very small, is what I'm saying. Is that what you're saying? Do we agree?
Yeah.
So I thought you said you had a lot of readers.
Yeah, so it's small. Yeah, so it's 6.9 thousand.
Yeah, so I wouldn't even worry about saying that, especially if it was an earlier version. If it became a question later, I would say let's let them fall in love with it, and then if they say, is there anything I need to know about this, then you could say a smaller, an earlier version appeared. I mean, when you think about it, you know, 50 Shades of Grey appeared on the Twilight fan fiction site and was read by a lot of people, and then they changed the names, and then they made them into non-Twilight people, and they still made a lot of money. So there's ways around it.
Okay.
That's
helpful.
Yeah, if you have a smaller readership, like 4,000, then I wouldn't mention it until the time. You will need to mention it at some point, but also if it was far enough back in time or an earlier version, you're going to be covered. What you want is somebody to love the version that you have now.
Oh, thank you. That's helpful. Because yeah, it's not far back, like time-wise, but draft-wise, It's far back, so the version that I will be submitting when I get to that point, I'm not at that point yet, will be definitely enough story elements will have changed that it won't be the same one that is
Right.
that
So
has been put
you
up.
become a better writer from then till now, even if it's a short time.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah,
Is there
thank
one
you
more
for your help.
question? Okay.
Okay, time for one last one, Sam.
Sure. It's
Okay,
2:20.
can we go to Eureka Tucker regarding writing for different genres? I think a few people were interested in that one. Did I get your name right? Sorry, Eureka, Jerika?
Hi, it's Sharika.
There. We hear you. Hi.
Hi. Thank you guys so much for doing this, first of all. And secondly, my question is, so I write a few genres, and I'm wondering how agents view that. Is it taboo for writers to write a few genres? Also, like, my main question is this, because I've seen some agents that they rep sci-fi fantasy and they maybe represent another genre that I do. So I'm wondering if I do sign with one agent for a certain genre, would they be averse to working in that other one as well?
That's a great question. What are the genres, just so that I know how similar or different they are?
Right. So some of them are more along the literary vein, and then like I have a historical fiction one that I, have been looking at for years, but haven't quite found the voice for it yet. So I'm not even sure when that would be worked out. But right now, everything that I have completed, I have 2 speculative fiction novels completed.
So literary versus speculative?
Basically, yeah.
Okay, so that's not such a big jump. If you look at somebody like Margaret Atwood, it seems like she's right there, like it's either literary or speculative,
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's different enough. I think that if you, in your initial query letter, if you're working with the historical, if you say you have other work and not be specific about it, that would be a conversation for the agent, because most agents will want to read whatever your next book is, assuming they've sold your first book. And if they like it, they're going to sell it. They're going to say, this is great. Like, I know who's going to want to buy it. And also, your editor for your first book might take on your next book, even if it's a different genre, because those aren't competing genres. Like, I was going to say, like, if you were doing young adult, like, or middle grade works, and then doing like, hardcore erotica on the other, like, those are 2 genres that it's hard to reconcile. So there might be, you might have to figure out, like, that's when a pseudonym might be handy or something. But anyway, most agents will be happy to stay with you, but also at the same time, if they really can't help you, they'll say, you know what, your speculative stuff is a little weird. I don't really think I can sell it. I think you should look for somebody else for that. And then that's when you have to have that conversation. Some writers have either 2 different agents for different genres, or they have a deal with, let's say, they're hybrid authors, which is that they'll have an agent for their, big 5 publishing stuff, and they'll have a deal with, let's say, a small or medium press that does whatever genre they're doing, like series, like a crime series, a mystery series, any kind of commercial fiction series, it could be even just comedy, like Shopaholic or something. Whatever the series is, they could do that with on their own, and then the bigger books they could do through their agent. So that's just something that you decide with your agent.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right, thanks, Sam. That was fantastic.
Thanks, everybody.
Really
It's so great to
appreciated.
see everybody and meet everybody today.
Thanks for everyone's questions. Please visit us at soyouwantowrite.org. We're doing a lot of things during this social isolation, not the least of which is Sam has a number of workshops coming up. We have a YA workshop coming up next Saturday. We have an email list that every Friday we share great writer tips and just fun stuff for writers. I'm not going to automatically add you to that list, so please sign up. I will, however, send you a follow-up email with the things that Sam has said he would share. And yeah, thanks so much for joining us. We'll look forward to seeing you as part of our group.
Bye, everybody. Good to meet you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. See you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.